everybody's number one regret is not starting earlier, right? Like every entrepreneur I know says their biggest regret is not starting earlier. And so one thing that maybe this will challenge or give a new perspective on what's the most common thing that I see. The most common thing that I see is time. The more time you give this, the more successful you're going to be. Whether this is real estate investing, businesses, even as a W-2 employee, right? You work your way up the ladder. Sure, there's absolutely people that will, find a shortcut of some sort, find a way to elevate themselves faster. That does happen, but that's the exception, not the rule. Don't think about that 1 in a million. Think about what is the number one common denominator between the 999,000 other successful people. It's that they continued to do it. They persevered. They were relentless in doing it, not for 1 year, not for 3 years, not for 5 years, but the longer they did it, the more successful they were.
Welcome to Burning the Ships podcast, and I'm your host, Jason Seward, and today I have a very exciting guest, my buddy, Fadi Boumitri. How you doing, man?
I don't know about exciting, but I'm doing well, man. How about you?
I'm good. It might not be exciting for anybody else, but I'm very excited. So we've talked about this for a while, and finally able to get it on our calendars and get it done. So you've got an interesting story, kind of with the theme of the podcast, Burning the Ships. And I'll let you kind of introduce yourself, but you're a recovering attorney, as you like to introduce yourself as.
Absolutely.
So I'm excited to kind of, as well as I've gotten to know you through the mastermind legacy family, which you're a big part of. I don't know the depth of your story, so I'm excited to kind of hear that with the audience and kind of dig into that a little bit. But before we get going, Fadi, if you'll humor me a little bit, every episode I'll start off, my son gives me a joke to tell. So we call it JJ's Joke of the Week, and this one is about as corny as he's given me. So, but I'll next one. Yeah. Why did the chicken join the band? Because it has drumsticks.
I like it.
It was JJ's Joke of the Week.
I am going to use that on my children today, actually.
Yeah, he comes up. I ended up, at first he was telling me he was making them up. And some of them I was like, man, I've seen or heard that before. But he's got a giant joke book that his grandma gave him that he pulls all these from. So, that has, I caught him in a little bit of a fib there. But nonetheless, it's funny. So, Fadi Boumitri, I met you, like I said a minute ago, through Legacy Family, which is really, and I've shared this a bunch on this show, really what catapulted me from my former world of W-2 into my current world of entrepreneurship full time. I had always kind of been doing both simultaneously for years. And you, whether you know it or not, played a real big role in that. Just obviously that mastermind group, with Bratz and you and Burton and Hannes and Matt, everybody that's involved, played somewhat of a role. But ultimately, when I made the decision to leave my job, the business we ended up in, which was the debt fund, the lending fund, that's your expertise as far as how to structure it and, raise capital and stuff like that. And you run the Wednesday call. For those that aren't familiar, Legacy does a daily boardroom call, and Fadi runs the Wednesday one every Wednesday for years. And I would hop on that call a lot of times just to ask a question and bounce off as soon as you answer, because I've got to go with ideas. And but you really spent hours early on helping me just transition my mindset from the type of sales I was doing to now raising capital and doing so differently and tapping into my network, how to structure things. And I thanked you, but I'd like to publicly thank you for all that you helped, early on and continue to help as I have questions. So, that said, I want to turn it over to you and let you formally introduce yourself, who you are, where you came from, go as deep as you want to go.
I don't know if I can do any better than what you just did, man. I appreciate it. So first of all, it's a pleasure to have you as part of the group, right? And you said the word mentor earlier, and it's funny, right? So I've had a couple people call me their mentor recently, and I've never thought of myself as somebody's mentor because I have my own mentors and I rely heavily on those mentors. And I think of what I'm doing as giving people tools, not mentoring them specifically. But words are words, right? If they want to call me a mentor, I'm not going to be disappointed about that. It's just a matter of, that's not how I think of myself. So let's start with a little bit of who I am. Number one, I am a father of three. I have a 5 and a 2-year-old boy and a 4-month-old girl, George, Jude, and Juliana. I am a husband of one. I am a business partner of a lot of people. I can't even count how many people at this point. That is kind of my joy in business, is not to be doing things alone. And the specific reason for that is because that's how I started off in business, right? So I was raised in a family that was an entrepreneurial family, partially by choice, partially out of necessity. So my father was an entrepreneur back in Lebanon, where we are from. But when we moved to the United States, we actually came here specifically for a wedding. We were going to be here for 3 months. And in the time that we were here, Lebanon was already in shambles. The civil war had broken out in 1984, and we're talking about 1988. So things had gotten very rough, but they got even worse while we were in the United States. And my mother decided that she was not going to allow our family to go back to Lebanon. And my father just kind of laughed at her and said, "What are you talking about?" Right? So there was a little bit of a quarrel there, and my father eventually left back for Lebanon without the wife and kids, thinking it would be a couple days and she'd be right behind him, begging him to send her a ticket to come back. And when that didn't happen, my father did what any good father would do and got his shit together and came back to the United States and lived in a country that he didn't know, speaking a language that he didn't speak, and figured it out at 47 years old, had to learn everything all over again. Fortunately, my father had done very well in his life. Unfortunately, from 1984 to 1988, if you look at the Lebanese lira, which is the monetary unit used in Lebanon, the amount of inflation took whatever wealth you had to about I want to say it was what was it? You lost somewhere around 98% of your wealth in the course of 4 years. So, he went from being a wealthy person to not so wealthy pretty quickly over that time period, because unfortunately, my father was not a believer in buying assets. He was a believer in keeping cash. He was very cash heavy. I remember coming home, or being home and him coming home when I was 3 years old back in Lebanon with a literal bag full of cash, because the monetary system had collapsed. And the inflation was so bad in Lebanon that it was literally a bag full of cash that he would bring home every day for the cars that he had sold. So that all kind of plays in pretty importantly to where I am today. I went through college and then law school. Law school more so out of a combination of necessity, because I didn't know what else I would do, and I always wanted to have a legal background, never to practice law, but more to transact businesses. That's what I've always wanted to do. Once I got out of law school, I started getting phone calls from family and friends asking me to help with this, help with that. One of my best friends actually called me and said, "Hey, I'm going back to the prosecutor's office full time, and the guy that I'm clerking for needs somebody. Would you be willing to come in for 10, 15, 20 hours a week and help him?" I met with the guy. I liked him a lot. I considered him a older version of myself. And so I decided, yeah, I did. I took up a clerkship with him, even though I was a full-blown attorney at that point, had passed the bar and everything. And that really just launched my legal career. I spent the next 7 years doing nothing but law, while also trying to, create a business on the side. I had numerous ideas that we tried to get off the ground. None of which we ever actually started, right? So lots and lots of meetings, no real materialization. And then I went to my first mastermind in January of 2017. Tim Bratz invited me out. I kind of laughed at him initially and said I was not going to pay him $2,500 for group therapy. He convinced me, and this is the most fun and also the saddest part of the story, is he convinced me to attend the mastermind by giving me an extra ticket to the Cavs suite that he had purchased for the mastermind. And so now I'm sitting here thinking, all right, not just one, but two tickets to the Cavs suite. Um, that's what got me to go. And he also told me that if I didn't get the value out of it, I didn't have to pay him at all. And it was a 2-day mastermind. It was January 2nd and the 3rd, if I remember correctly. And at the end of the first day of the mastermind, I literally pulled out a check, wrote it, and handed it to him and said, "You were right, and I was wrong." What I would still kind of describe it as, therapy for entrepreneurs. It really is. But
For sure.
if you have the right people in that room, that therapy can elevate you as a person, your business, all of those things. So I went from being a solo entrepreneur as a lawyer running my own law firm, right, to within a few months, I went to my second. First of all, that first mastermind totally blew my mind. Um, More than anything, what it got me to realize is how small I was thinking and how small I was playing. And this was the theme of the last 7 years of, well, I want to do something else. But while I'm looking to find that something else, I'm going to build this law firm because that's just natural, right? And I got to the point where I was miserable, not because I didn't enjoy what I was doing, but because I wasn't building for me. I had numerous standing offers from various of my clients to come in, not as their in-house attorney, but as a partner in whatever it is they were doing and whatever it is they had built. And they were all very successful. I'm sitting here saying no to all of them. I have family members and friends reaching out and saying they have X number of dollars and they want to start a business together. And my answer to everyone was no, I want to do it on my own. I had this, I'll call it a chip on my shoulder. I don't really know how it developed, but 7 years of watching bad partnerships as an attorney, I didn't want partners. And I was keeping myself stuck where I was. And I went to that first mastermind. It blew my mind open, but I didn't change anything. And then May, 4 months later, 4.5, Tim invited me out to a second one. And because of how well the first one went, I couldn't say no this time, right? So I wrote the check. I came to my second mastermind. There was 3 or 4 people in that room that were the same as the last time. So about 15 to 20 people in the room each time. But 3 or 4 of them were the same people. Tim Bratz, Mark Evans, Ramon Gonzalez. And I remember these 3 dissecting my life, my mindset, my business, my decision making, all of it. And me at the end of it going, I got to change everything, right? And I knew that the first time. But what the second mastermind did was force me, force accountability more than anything, right? So it forced me within 2 weeks of that second mastermind, I changed everything, right? I started raising money and doing more deals with Tim Bratz, who I had raised, I had invested with previously, and family members of mine had invested previously with, but now it became a structured partnership as opposed to, we funded a deal and we did a deal together. I also, at that same time, put in an application, something I probably never would have done in my life. I took every dollar I had in every one of my businesses and all of my personal accounts and put it into an application to win a marijuana cultivation license, which I had absolutely no business doing. And the only reason I was willing to do it because I had partners that were across the country at that point, distributed. And, I felt confident that I was investing not just in a business or in an industry, but with the jockeys that I thought I would want to invest with. That didn't end up working out for me. That partnership eventually dissolved. The 3 partners I had were all out of the business within a few years. And I was literally just handling the business entirely on my own. At that point, I also shut down the law firm and decided that I only wanted to do things where I could do it in a team. I could leverage some other people's time, but most importantly, I could leverage other people's brains, their knowledge, their abilities. And that's kind of what I've been doing ever since in my partnership, both on the real estate side with Tim and his team, as well as with my cannabis venture. So people ask me, what do you do for a living? And right now I don't know what the answer to that is other than whatever it takes, right? So I own a cannabis business and I invest in a lot of real estate. I syndicate real estate.
So I've got a million questions I'm jotting down here. So we're gonna go backwards a bit. So it's funny you talk about that first mastermind because Bratz was on here a couple months ago, and he told that story from his perspective. Um, And, his story was he was trying to figure out how to get enough money for a suite at the Cavs game. So it was a big game or something, or big series. And so he had the idea, well, he paid for the suite. Now I got to sell tickets to a mastermind. And he mentioned, having to, he was like, one of my best friends, I couldn't even get him to buy a ticket without offering him a refund if he didn't like it. So it's kind of cool to hear you tell the same story from your perspective. So,
What I want to mention while you say that, Jason, is if you've never been to a mastermind, find a quality mastermind, and no matter what it costs, get into that room, because I legitimately don't think I ever would have gotten into that room if Tim didn't basically force me with an extra Cavs ticket, but also the you don't pay me unless you believe in the power of what we've done. And I don't know where I would probably still be a solo entrepreneur attorney, miserable and hating my life every single day if I had not done that, if I had not taken that plunge.
I can 100% relate. When I joined Legacy, at that point it had grown into what it is, a bigger mastermind, but I was still like forward focused. Like, I'm doing the real estate on the side. It had grown to a point. Now I've got 2 full-time jobs, but up to that point, I had never spent money on not a single penny on a mentor, a networking group, or anything. So that was a big ticket for me, to join a commitment like that. But if I hadn't have done it, I don't even know what convinced me to do it, but I finally pulled the trigger and did it. And Bill and I did it together. I would still be trying to figure out how to manage all the stuff I had going on, the W-2 career and the real estate. So I agree 100%. You mentioned prior to that, like, that was not your mindset. It was do everything on your own, figure it out, kind of internalize. You didn't say that, but kind of internalize everything and just you're solo. And you said you don't know where that came from. Do you think it sounds like your father was that way a little bit? Like, just
More so my mother than my father.
oh, okay.
So
Okay.
my mother is a very strong woman, and she worked her ass off for a long time. So my father is very much I mean, he used to tell me all the time, work smart, don't work hard. And, you've got to spend money to make money. Whereas my mother was complete opposite. The harder you work, the better you'll do. Nobody's going to do it as well as you do. Right. So I'm very fortunate that I had both of those perspectives. And I'd like to say that I have a good balance of both, although my mother comes out a little bit more than I would like sometimes, where I just got to do something myself to have it done right. And not going to accept the 80% of, somebody else doing it. But yeah, it's funny. It's embarrassing. But at one point back when Twitter was the big thing, right? Facebook was big, but then Twitter got real big. And my Twitter, used to say that I was a self-made man.
Right.
Sorry. I can't say it without laughing at myself. And the reason I laugh is because, as much as I like to think about being self-made or that I've gotten to where I am, I had parents that helped with everything along the way, a system around me that encouraged this. Even when I went out on my own with Tim Brotz and with the marijuana venture, I had a wife that was a high wage W-2 employee, and she gave me the confidence of she looked at me and said, "Do it. Spend every dollar you have on this. Do it." And I got us. Right. And the next couple of years were financially miserable for me because I was not making money as an attorney. I was spending money to build out this behemoth of a cultivation facility. For me back then, it was a behemoth. Right. I was putting in my time with Tim Brotz to earn the equity in all the real estate stuff, and really just, as you call it, burning the ships and leaving no possibility of going backwards. This has to work moving forward. And thankfully for me, it ended up working.
Yeah, and I want to, I want to be very clear, and I'd love to get your perspective too on this burning the ships mindset, because, like, at a high level, you burn the ships, you have no plan B, you go all in, or you die trying, right? There's a lot of nuance there, because I don't ever want, because, I have a lot of folks reach out to me because they know I left a corporate job to go into this. That did not happen overnight. And I did not, yes, I burned a ship, but I had, through experience and years of trying to build something on the side, I built the confidence to know I can build another ship. And if that ship sinks, I can build another ship. So I think there's like to have the confidence to do that. In your case, a wife that supports you in doing that, both psychologically, financially, whatever you want to call it. Um, but also years of knowing that you're resourceful enough to build a better ship, right? And keep plugging away at it. So I kind of, the reason I bring that up because I don't want anybody, especially somebody that just hasn't really figured out where to go with their plan, to just say, "Oh, I'm gonna burn it all to the ground, and I'm just gonna grind my way into something that." That's not it at all. What's your perspective on that?
So Tim Bratz and I we used to butt heads a little bit on this, right? Tim was very much the burn the ships, don't give yourself a choice, move forward. And I was the give yourself another ship to jump onto, then burn the old ship, right? And I remember at masterminds, Tim would say, "No, do it. Just quit your W-2." And my answer was always, the minute that you have something else that you can do, yes, you should burn the boat. But until you've built that something else, until your side hustle is big enough that you can turn it into a main hustle, or until you have a partnership that you can dive into that you know from day one can run, hit the ground running, or until you have that idea that you know is the idea, don't just quit your job and sit around wondering what you're going to do next. To me, that's not what burning the ships is about. To me, burning the ships is once you see that opportunity and you know that's what you want, burn everything behind you and move towards it.
Yep. And one more note on this. You talk about like having people dissect your situation. I think it's very important to do that before you make a move too. And a real example of that for me is my first event with you guys was in Nashville. First time I met the group and a lot of people in the group.
That was a hell of an event for the first.
Oh yeah, it was fantastic. But and my wife came. I mean, we just had a blast, and that whole week our eyes were open to, okay, this is our new world, right? But it was a very specific moment sitting at the round tables where we do like 6 people at a table, and everybody gets 10 minutes to kind of walk through what they're dealing with. And mine was, I was trying to figure out how to build this bridge from W-2 world to full-time entrepreneurship. Real high income W-2 world, something that was still building, but I had a vision on the entrepreneurship side. So I got very vulnerable. It's the first time I had ever done this with anybody other than my wife and my business partner, Bill, where I laid out literally every penny of my finances. This is how much I have in the bank. This is how much I earn on a monthly and annual basis. This is how much savings I have. This is what's in my retirement account. And we put that puzzle together. And it was the first time I kind of had this like aha, but I had about a 5-year runway of savings because I had been very frugal and building things on the side where I could cut off that income, be just fine, not compromise my standard of living while leaning in and trying to build something to replace it and exceed it, right? So when I laid all that out, basically the whole table looked at me like, "What the hell are you doing? Why are we even having this conversation?" And it took that, to your point, that dissecting of everything and really people pressing me on it for me to realize, okay, these are people that are a few steps ahead of me, some of them way ahead of me. And that power of that belief that they had in my situation gave me the confidence to ultimately burn the ships. And that I think, and you kind of had a similar thing, it sounds like, through the mastermind. So
Borrowed belief, my friend.
that's
I remember after the first mastermind, Ramon Gonzalez, who I'd never met before the mastermind, him and I he heard me talking about my immigrant mindset and how that kind of still affected everything back then and still does to this day, right? And he just resonated with that, and he took me under his wing, and we had a lot of conversations. And Ray is to this day still a good friend, and I consider him to be one of my mentors. And it's one of these things where whenever I feel like I just need that little bit of a pep, Ramon is my guy, because he's got that eternal optimism, but at the same time, uncanny ability to cut an idea down to shreds and tear it apart and shit up. right?
Right.
He's so good at it too, and I love that about him. But Ramon came up to me and goes, and he's like, "Let me ask you something, brother. Do you realize that you're the smartest guy in this room, but you're not the most successful?" And I was like, and this is no offense to anybody, but we had people in the room that legitimately not high IQ at all, like pretty low IQ. They had all kinds of excuses for why they shouldn't be successful. Prison time, stutters, no family to help them get them started, no business back, all of the reasons not to be successful. And yet there they were sitting next to me with all of the reasons to be successful, all of the education, all of the everything else. And listen, I'm not saying I wasn't at all successful, but I wasn't happy with where I was, right?
Right.
And when you start talking about numbers and you're like, how's this fucking guy doing better numbers than I am, right?
Right.
And you're starting to think, oh, well, he's leveraging multiple people's time, multiple people's brain power, multiple people's, all of the things that you're not doing. And I remember Mark Evans was in that room as well. Mark and Ramon dissecting well, have you hired an assistant? Yeah. How'd that go? Didn't go well. Fired her. Okay. How much time did you spend hiring her? She walked into my office, gave me a resume, and I told her she was hired. Okay. How much time did you spend training her? Maybe 15, 20 minutes, 2 or 3 separate times on various things. Oh, I'm shocked that she didn't work out. And I'm just sitting there as I'm saying it, like, I never gave her a chance. She never had a chance to succeed. I did nothing to help her succeed, and therefore nothing to help myself succeed through her. And just learning all of these things on the spot and seeing other people, again, I'm not trying to talk, badly about anybody else that was in those rooms, but seeing that I'm just as capable as anybody else in those rooms, but not doing what they're doing, that was a real eye opener.
Yeah. Yeah. And I'd be on the other side of that. I'm the one with, like, I'm not high IQ. Like, my superpower is just, I'm resourceful. I can pull things together and figure them out. And I'm, you know, I might have been early in my life, early in my career, a little insecure about that. Like, I'm not going to be able to have you know, I've sat down and had a conversation with Brian Fast and wherever we just were in Napa. And I ended that conversation. I was like, I, I'm not on the same planet as him. I don't know what we just talked about, but I'm resourceful enough to make things happen and put the right people around me. So, but to your point, I had, although we're a little bit different when it comes to the IQ level, maybe I saw the same thing when I entered these rooms. There's a lot of people just like me, right? And they're figuring it out. Why can't I? And that's a pretty powerful thing to actually see it. You can hop on all the Zoom calls and watch all the podcasts you want, but to actually feel that in a room and interact with people and socialize and start building those relationships, freaking powerful, man. So
Borrowed belief based on their ability to do it, based on their belief in you doing it. I now believe I can do it.
yep, exactly. So I want to spend a little bit of time. So you mentioned your wife, and this is something I like. When folks lead with, I'm a husband and I'm a father. I want to tap into that a little bit. You mentioned I didn't know that about your story. The fact that your wife said, "Go do it. I believe in you. I've got you." Um, Go a little bit deeper into that. Like, that was probably, your kids are young, what, 5, 4, and fairly newborn. But when you were going through that, was that prior to kids, or did you have kids yet?
It was prior to kids. We were about a year. We were about a year married at that point.
Okay.
We were in the process of purchasing a home, and my budget was about one half of what her budget was. She wanted about twice as nice of a house as what I wanted, a starter home. She wanted something she wouldn't. And at that time, my attorney mentor, the one that took me under his wing, said, "I'm going to tell you a piece of advice that I won't say to very many people, but spend more on your house than you think you can afford." And I was like, "Al, that is 100% the opposite of what everybody's advice is." And he goes, "Yes, but you are a very, said a couple nice things about me." And he's like, "You are going to succeed. Spend more on your house than you think you can afford, because in a few years, you'll be very grateful that you don't have to move out of that house for a bigger one. And I took it seriously, and my wife was never going to allow me to spend the half that I wanted to spend anyway. So we ended up buying a bigger house than I thought I could afford. And now looking back, I wish we had bought bigger. Yeah. But it is what it is. But yes, she was a pharmacist back then. She was making good money. She put in a little bit of overtime. We're not talking high six figures, but she was making decently into the six figures. And she, again, she's very conservative and she's very calculated, and she needs absolute precision when she makes a decision. If it's not 100% the right decision, she can't make that decision. I am largely, I'll calculate it in my mind very quickly and make a decision very quickly, right? I'd like to think that I make very good calculated decisions, but at the same time, it's a lot faster than most people would be willing to move on things, right? So, I actually remember we were living in my mother's house, between, it was May of 2017, I want to say, and we were moving into our house. We didn't move in until we closed November 7th of 17. So we were about 6 months away from actually closing on a house. We were still looking for a house. My mother didn't live there, so she offered for us to live there, and we did. And we were in my bedroom, and I remember being at my dresser drawer and telling her, this account, that account, this much money, that much money, all of it that's going into this thing. And she asked me, let me ask you a question. Why are you doing this? And we had a conversation. She's like, no, you're not answering my question. Why are you doing this? Why are you putting up this much money? Why are you risking everything that you had for this? And my answer was, I will never be able to live with myself if I don't. And she immediately responded, then do it. Do it. And off to the races at that point. That was 2017. We had our first child in 2020, almost exactly 3 years later. And then 3 years after that, we had our second. And then 21 months after that, we had our third. She was working full time after we had our first. So she went back to work, was working full time, and I was begging her to reduce her hours because she was not happy. Eventually, she went from 40 hours to 32. And I was like, okay, this is much better, but still not enough. It took her another 6 months to move to 24 hours. And then about a year later, hey, I'm work as needed. It was 1 day a week, generally. Thankfully, it's been even less than that now. And I want her to be able to go out and pursue her passions and work and do whatever she wants, but she wasn't happy. And that's why I say thankfully. Now she's we had our third child 4 months ago, and she's home with the baby. And she's like, I don't even know how I lived through that first pregnancy. And I'm so grateful that we can do what we're doing now. So she fully plans on going back to work once baby girl Juliana is, a little bit more capable of going out on her own and going to school and all that other stuff. But in the meantime, to go to a job she didn't like, wasn't appreciated at, and not be able to raise her children was killing her. And I'm very grateful that I was able to help with that.
Yeah, that's powerful, man. And it goes both ways. I'm like, you've got to look back on that, and obviously you do. You just articulated it, but be so appreciative of her belief in you, and like not especially when you say you couldn't live with yourself if you didn't do this, right? And a lot of spouses, just out of fear, might say, well, you're not doing it, right? We've got a family to build and raise, and instead she went the other direction. And I want to make this about you, but it reminds that I've got to tell the story.
Please do.
But what I mentioned Nashville earlier, I showed up in Nashville. I told Bill on the way out there, Kim Brotz is going to try to convince us, and that whole room is going to convince us to leave our jobs. We are not going there and leaving our jobs. That is not the goal here. We're just going to see what it's all about. I told my wife that too. On the plane back, or in the airport back, getting ready to head back home from Nashville, I go up to Bill and I say, I'm done. I'm out. Well, you do what you want, but I'm out. I'm moving forward. That quick. But the story is, We get home. I had one more like nagging thought that I just had to get clarity on, and that was around my wife is like to a flaw sometimes supports everything I say and do, right? Like I support you, honey. Yeah, I believe in you. I support you. And like sometimes I want to be checked, right? Which but very rarely will she do that. She just believes in me that much. But when we got home, the biggest strain on our marriage at that time was time, right? I had two young kids, I had a wife. My biggest priority was them, but I was not managing my time like that. I was working my full-time job, I was working real estate, and that left very little time for them. So we get back, got a week later. I'm in bed in the bedroom, just like you were talking about with your wife, and I said, Katie, I need you. I know you get anxious about a lot of things. I know you internalize that, but I need to hear it from you. If I'm leaving this job because I'm ready to do it, are you going to resent me for doing it? Are you going to internalize that and then we have problems? And she just stopped me dead in my tracks and said, and I get goosebumps every time I tell the story, but she said, me and the kids do not give a shit how much money you make. We just want you here. And that was my green light to pull the trigger. And I say all that because it ties into what you said. The power of having a spouse, significant other, whatever it is, that believes in you that much and that just wants you to be happy and successful and to be a part of everything that is supposed to be going on as a family. That is a superpower a lot of people don't talk about, man. And that's very powerful. And I didn't know that about your wife and your story. So I'm refreshed to hear that.
It's the second biggest blessing in life, right? Health of the children, number one, but a spouse that is that supportive, that is that strong for you when you need them. Oh man, second biggest blessing in the world.
Absolutely. So let's move on to the kids. They're young. You said 5, 4, and 4 months.
5, 2, and 4 months.
5, 2, and 4 months. Gotcha. Okay. They're young right now. The 5-year-old's probably getting to a point where they're just starting to comprehend some things, and then it's game on when they all get to that point. How aware of that are you as far as like the example you're setting, and how motivated are you to act in a way that's going to set a good model for them and on a good path as whatever they grow into?
Man, it's the hardest thing I do as a human being is take every action I do and dissect it and think about how my son, because fortunately, unfortunately, whatever you want to call it, he is very smart. He mimics both his mother and I extremely well. He emotionally very intelligent. His vocabulary is off the charts, and sometimes you think you're talking to a full-blown human being and you forget that he's 5 years old, or very recently was just 4, and you're having this conversation with him. And I mean, as even just last night, let's take for instance, he said something that hurt my feelings, and it doesn't hurt my feelings. It's very difficult to hurt my feelings, but it hurts my feelings because it means I've failed. And I've said things in front of him that cause him to act this way because that's what he's seen and that's what he's learned. And I'd like to say I'm a pretty rational, pretty reasonable, pretty level-headed person, but it doesn't mean that I don't have slip-ups. It doesn't mean that I don't say things. And unfortunately, he's a sponge and he catches all of them. And so he said this thing, and my wife's like, "What is wrong with you? You've been off," right? And I'm like, I fully recognize that with each time that he says something like this, it is not a him, failure. It is a me failure. It is me coming out in his personality. And I gotta just figure out a way to always be the best version of me in front of him. And I already had this epiphany when we had a daughter, believe it or not. Like I love my sons, of course, but having a daughter was a game changer for me because I realized that everything she sees me doing is what she's going to eventually marry. And that, for whatever reason, clicked for me and was extremely powerful and made me think a lot more about how often I'm away from home and for how long and what I'm doing and all those other things, right? So it had already clicked there. And Tanya's, my wife, sorry, is really good at diving deeper into the thoughts and the whys than I am. And especially when it comes to our children, she's a lot better at it. I'll give you my favorite example is, you know, I was talking about how George, our son, he was probably 2 years old at the time, how he was talking about, oh, we went and did this thing a long time ago. And I was like, George, that was 2 days ago, right? And I was laughing about it with her, and she goes, what you don't realize is to him, 2 days ago is a very large percentage of his life. So to him, it is a very long time ago, whereas to you, it is a much smaller percentage of your life. So it is not that long to you. And it blew my mind to think about our children thinking about time, not in the construct of the way we do of just time, but in the construct of percentage of their life and how long ago it was as compared to the rest of his life that he can even remember at 2 years old. And it was a perspective that really just blew my mind. You know, it absolutely had me thinking about every time he talks about time moving forward from that point on, I had that in my mind and it changed how I interacted with him.
Dude, I have never thought of it from that lens. That's powerful. And that's a regular thing. I mean, I've got young kids that are quickly getting older like they do, but um yeah, like I've lived on this world 43 years. A year ago is a very small percentage of that time versus a year ago to my 9-year-old who, yeah, that,
That's 11% of his life ago.
yeah, yeah, I'm glad you brought that up. Now you got my brain spinning in all kinds of directions. So that's pretty powerful. You talk about your daughter, and then we're gonna move on to a couple other things, but about my daughter's 13, and it was my first child, but having a daughter and my son, but mostly my daughter, with that mindset of what you just said, that she most likely is going to seek out someone that is like her dad at some point, right? And that has made me, you know, I can't sit here and say I'm a great husband. My wife would have to be the one to say that, but my daughter has made me a better husband. And because I want, and it's always on my mind, it never goes away. I want to set an example for her in the way I treat my wife and the way I interact and flirt with my wife and all those things and that make everybody feel safe in my house. I want her to seek that out as she starts dating and stuff like that. So I agree with you there. And then you just had your daughter. So you've got years,
Oh, yeah.
years of that. But it definitely was a perspective shift for me. But Katie and I were married 2 years before we had Emma. And instantly, it changed how I always treated Katie well, but it changed how I interacted with her publicly and in front of everybody and stuff like that. Like I do it because I know these little eyeballs are watching me do it, and that's pretty powerful.
Yep. Absolutely. There's certain jokes I'll make with my wife, but if the kids are present, and it's not because I don't want them to hear the jokes, it's because I want them to see me edifying my wife as opposed to every once in a while just giving her a little bit of.
Right. I get it. So, all right. You mentioned earlier the first venture into the cannabis space, right? And how you had a partnership that didn't work out. Well, that's not the case now. You've actually leaned in, I guess, the second or third go around in that space, and you've actually got some traction on something pretty big. You can go wherever you want with that, but do you care to elaborate on where you're at with that now, what you're building, and what kind of the future looks like there?
Sure. So in that same partnership, I eventually bought out those partners or removed those partners, depending on which one we're talking about, right? I brought in somebody new to run the operation. That didn't work out very well either. So I was probably about 4 years into things when I met who is now my current business partner, and we got along very well from the very first time. There was a lot of, yeah, it's a very long and funny story, but I really believe that whether you believe in God, the universe, or whatever higher power you believe in, the universe takes you in a direction sometimes, right? And when I decided to apply for a medical marijuana cultivation facility when I had never smoked or tried any drug in my entire life, people wondered why. And I tell them, I didn't choose this. The universe is telling me to do this, and if I try to resist, it's throwing me in that path. And it did it multiple times in multiple different ways, and it just really opened up the floodgates once I accepted that this was happening. Things were happening. When I tell the story, it's a much longer story, but people are like, yeah, this was definitely meant to be, right? And then things went poorly for a long time, and you're like, man, I the universe lied to me, right? But then I met Ben, and Ben brought multiple partners in with him, each one of them good at what they do, right? So it was all of the things, all of the philosophies I had been talking about since I went to my first mastermind in 2017, they all culminated in this meeting with Ben where he's like, no, I don't want you to bring me in. I want to bring a whole team with me. This one is really good at dispensary operations. This one is really good at compliance. This one is really good at growing the actual product. I'm really good at operating all of those things, putting the systems and the people in place, right? I don't want you to bring me in. I want you to bring the whole crew in. And I'm like, Ben, you understand that there's X amount of equity here. I will give you that equity, and then you can go hire those people. And he goes, I don't want to hire these people. I want them coming in with me as equity owners. And that's when I knew that I had the right person there, right? And so I brought Ben in. My biggest complaint right now, if I'm being honest with you, is that I haven't provided them with the tools that they need to be as successful as they're capable of being. And that is as simple as they need a much bigger and better built out facility to grow the quality that they're capable of growing. I've been able to do that on a small scale with one additional room that is built properly. And so that one room spits out some of the highest quality products in Ohio. But we have this expansion that we've been working on for about a year now, and a year and a half now. And, I have not been able to bring that expansion to full fruition. I'm still working on that and still moving that forward. But, it's been a bigger challenge than I expected to bring the money together to get that going. And that is the one reason why we are where we are as opposed to where I believe we'll be in a few months. And that is, so many pieces moving in the right direction. He's actually brought in additional partners since then, one for a processing side of things. And it's one of these things where all of the pieces are there. You just got to give them the tools. And that's my job, is I've got to go out there and put the investors together, put the debt together to give them this gigantic facility that they need to be the large tool that they need to move this thing forward.
Yeah, and you started off in the medical space, but now Ohio, recently, which I I would imagine you were hoping for this early on, but it is now in place where now it's recreational, and what you're one of very few licenses in the state that's able to do what you're doing. So that gives you a lot of leverage and growth potential. And you and I've talked a lot offline about this. I'm mesmerized at where you're going with this. And so I'm excited for you. What are your I know like every business does a SWOT analysis, but like what are your threats, or the things that you see as challenges moving forward?
Our biggest threat is government, right? Coming in and making giant changes. And our second biggest threat is my inability to raise this cash. So I've built out a company that is larger than what we're capable of operating at, right? We're top heavy because we have a director of cultivation. Whether you have one plant or 10 million plants, you need one director of cultivation. You need one director of ops. You need one director of compliance, right? So I've got this team that's built out that has run exponentially bigger facilities than anything we would dream of building. But I have to give them that facility to run here. Otherwise, what I'm doing is bleeding myself dry over the next whatever amount of time, right? So we're top heavy. We're doing everything at a high level because of the fact that we have all these people here, but they're capable of so much more. So think about it as building a giant company, but never giving them the tools to actually get to a large scale, right? So it's almost like Apple with their, obviously I'm not trying to say we're Apple or anything like that, but it's like Apple having all of these executives and all these top minds, but then they're only able to produce 1,000 phones a year because they never built out the warehouses and
Right.
whatever facilities to actually build these phones. That's where we're stuck right now.
So capital solves that.
Of course, capital is usually going to be one of the biggest drivers. It's funny because when I had the capital, I didn't have the people. I slowly bled that capital out, and then I found all the right people, and now I'm having trouble finding the capital.
Gotcha. Yeah. Well, I don't think when you turn that up, I like turn that engine up, and maybe maybe part of that is bringing on a small sales force or something to go out and find it. But I think and I'm going to encourage, I mean, a lot of our investors listen to this podcast and a lot of potential investors do as well. Reach out and Fatty, we'll put all your information in the show notes, but I would encourage folks to at least have a conversation if they're interested in what you're building there, because I've seen it. I've seen behind the curtain a little bit, and it's very impressive, especially what you guys are offering.
I appreciate that.
Yep. Last thing, and we'll start wrapping up soon, but I really want to dig into this a little bit. We're back at it. And as you can see, Fatty's got a new background. He got booted out of where he was, and now he's outside getting some fresh air. So we'll start wrapping this up. But the question I want to ask, Fatty, is we mentioned earlier about you being such a big part of, you had a lot of pivotal and like life-changing, career-changing moments through joining masterminds and being a part of them. But now you're a integral part of a big mastermind, which is Legacy Family. Tim Bratz and y'all's entire team, y'all do a fantastic job putting on events and then just adding value throughout the year with a lot of things that you do. You play a big role on the weekly board calls, the boardroom calls, and you kind of host and run the Wednesday calls. And you've done that how many years? Probably, I mean, ever since I've been involved.
So consistently for 5 years as Legacy Family, and prior to that, I was involved in the predecessor to Legacy Family, which was, it was not owned by Tim Bratz, but he was the face of it, right? So,
Yep.
We'll say 5.5 years.
So not just through those calls, but also being a part of all of these events and being really hands-on with a lot of the members and stuff like that. You've interacted with hundreds, if not thousands of people, right? That are trying to either, they might be well on their way to success, or maybe have had a lot of success, but trying to get to the next step, or maybe they're trying to downsize a little bit. But you also deal with a lot of people that are just starting out. So you've seen a lot of different mindsets, a lot of different challenges and things like that. Talk about some of the common denominators you see that have led to success and failure from folks that you've mentored along the way. And I know you don't think of yourself as a mentor, but you most certainly are.
So I was actually just talking about this the other day with a good friend of mine. We were talking about how it's everybody's number one regret is not starting earlier, right? Like every entrepreneur I know says their biggest regret is not starting earlier. And so one thing that maybe this will challenge or give a new perspective on what's the most common thing that I see. The most common thing that I see is time. The more time you give this, the more successful you're going to be. Whether this is real estate investing, businesses, even as a W-2 employee, right? You work your way up the ladder. Sure, there's absolutely people that will, find a shortcut of some sort, find a way to elevate themselves faster. That does happen, but that's the exception, not the rule. Don't think about that one in a million. Think about what is the number one common denominator between the 999,000 other successful people. It's that they continued to do it. They persevered. They were relentless in doing it, not for 1 year, not for 3 years, not for 5 years, but the longer they did it, the more successful they were. So yeah, obviously you have to add in the tools, the right people around you. And I'm a big believer in hiring the right people, bringing them in as equity owners. That's something that, I firmly believe in, just because I want people to stick around long term. There are absolutely other ways to do that between, profit sharing plans or 401ks or other things, but incentivizing people to stick around, I think, if I had to say that the three top things, right? Number one is stick around for a long time yourself. Do it for, don't do it for one. If you're only going to do it for 1 to 3 years, you're never going to see the success that you're looking for, right? That's a get rich quick scheme as opposed to building something. Number two is surround yourself with the right people, whether that be mentors, whether that be employees, whether that be partners. That's going to be probably the number two indicator of all success to me, is who they surround themselves with.
I couldn't agree more. I'm gonna take you back to. I know you have so many calls, but this is a very specific example of you kind of helping me through an early situation where we had just launched the fund. Now I'm in capital raise mode, and um, I was stalling a little bit. Now, I wasn't stalling. I just wasn't getting the results that I arrogantly thought I should be getting because I'm a good salesperson, right? That was my mindset. Like I've sold all this insurance to all these clients for all these years, never had a bad spot. Like I was always successful with that. I should be able to transfer that into raising capital just fine.
Yep.
So if you remember, I'd hop on those calls on Wednesdays, and I was like, man, I can't sell the urgency because there's no urgency to sell. And you said to me, and I remember exactly where I was. I was walking around my field behind my house, and I remember exactly the mud puddle that I was going around as you said this. But you said, Jason, just stay at it, and you're gonna blink. It's gonna feel like it's gonna take forever, but you're gonna look up, and all this stuff, like you're planting all these seeds, you're gonna have a huge harvest in like 2 to 3 years. Well, that was about 2 years ago, and at that time I might have raised $3 million, which again I thought I'd be at 5 to 10 by then, and it still went slow after that. Little trickling in. And here in the last 6 months, we've gone from like 10 to 15, well on our way to 20. Like everything you said, and that sums up what you just said. Time. You convinced me, and this is the power of having a mentor or a community of folks that have seen this play out. You convinced, like, had I not had that, and you and several others telling me the same thing, I might have said, screw this, I'm going to chase the next rabbit. But I stuck to it, Bill stuck to it, and now we're starting to reap some harvest of those seeds planted. So I thank you for that, first of all, because like that, you were my sounding board to kind of, a lot of times I was just getting on there to complain. Like, Fadi, I don't know what to do, man. Everybody's interested, but they're not wiring the money, So I agree with that as far as just people being impatient. I forget who I heard say this, but you gotta be patient when it comes to the results, but ruthlessly impatient in the task to get there, the process of getting there.
Love that.
And I like that too. I also see a lot of people that lean into these masterminds for a short amount of time just to extract what they can extract out of it, and then they move on to the next thing. I'm sure you've seen that. I've just seen it just being a part of it. What are your thoughts on that?
So I've got a lot of thoughts there, right? Number one is there's been people that have come and gone that didn't fit the culture of the group, and you have to almost be thankful that they didn't stick around. And then there's people that it really hurts when they leave that group, because you think of them as a friend, you think of them as somebody that you would do business with. What I will say is, generally what we tend to find is the longer that you're in the mastermind, the more likely you are to partner up with people and do more deals together, the more access you're going to get. And it's not just, hey, you're part of this master, with any mastermind, right? The longer you're in that mastermind, the more credibility you're going to build with those people, the more rapport you're going to build with those people, the more opportunity those people are going to get while they know you. and therefore be able to bring to you, and the more top of mind you're going to be because you go to these events together, right? And that's why it's very important to be in those rooms. And we've had people say, hey, I'm looking for something more tactical. Okay, I understand that, right? We've had people say, hey, I'm looking for something more high level. Okay, I understand that. uh, you know we're never going to be able to do everything for everyone, but the whole point of what we've tried to structure is the events are going to be high level, where we're giving you kind of direction. And then the daily boardroom calls are for the tactical, right? Hey,
Yeah.
we're here to help you manipulate things on a small scale. And not just us, by the way. There's times when Jason hops on the call and he's answering a question for somebody else who maybe, a year behind him, 2 years, 3 years behind him, but is on a similar path, right? So it's all about making sure that you're in a group, in a room with people that, number one, are doing things, and number two, are willing to share what they're doing and not just keeping it close to the vest.
Yep, I agree, and I think there's an evolution to these groups. Like if you give it enough time. Like for me, when I first joined, I didn't have any value to offer the group, right? I didn't have capital to lend. I was just trying to learn more about commercial real estate. That I just wanted an education. So I was extracting a lot of value, but at the same time, if I'm going to be a part of something, I'm always, and I encourage everybody to do this, try to find where you can provide value. When I first joined, the only way I could provide value is just build relationships, and then I kind of leaned into trying to lead these little workout challenges between the events and stuff to just, kind of get to know everybody and motivate some people. And then that evolves. There's an evolution there. Now I'm starting to build something, and now I do have more value I can offer to the group and still extract value from those that are, the Kelly Garretts of the world, you, Brats, all of that. And I think like I get probably more benefit now than I did early on, because now I'm kind of equally playing both sides, if that makes any sense. I'm providing some value and I'm extracting, but more than anything else, like we just spent a couple days in Napa. I was with some of my best friends, right? And we got a chance to vent about all the hard things we're going through. We got a chance to, fortunately for me, I just had a big event in my business, so I was able to celebrate that while I was there, and that truly becomes what this particular group is, legacy family. It is a family, and I truly believe that. So
Yeah, I can't tell you. I got a handwritten note from one of the members saying, "Hey, as many events as I've been to, this was the first time that we really got to know each other, and I really appreciate it." You can't possibly get to know people on the level that you want to get to know them. Not every person, every event, right? So, with a group like this, you learn more and more about people with each passing event. And sometimes it's, with me, people think that I'm extremely serious, and then they find out that I like to have a little bit of fun too. And they're like, oh man, I didn't know this side of you. I love this side of you. I feel like you're more relatable now. I feel like I want to hang out with you more, but also like, yeah, again, I'm not trying to toot my own horn, but it's like, hey, you're so smart, but you also have that much fun. And it's like, well, if you're not having fun, what are you doing it for? Right? Like,
why?
yeah.
Right. Yeah,
So,
absolutely. Well, Fatty, I could sit here and talk to you for another couple hours, man, but I want to respect your time and don't want to drag this on too long. But I can't express enough and again, I know you don't like the word mentor, but those are your best mentors, right? Kelly Garrett doesn't think of herself as my mentor. She is absolutely my mentor, but she's also one of my best friends. And I consider you in that category too. And I am grateful that the universe has led me to y'all's group and all the things that have come from that. And I appreciate what you provide and value. Not just like your story alone is a great testament to, you know, leaning in, getting uncomfortable. It may or may not work out, but you showed up to that mastermind kind of poo-pooing it and walking away with your life changed a little bit. And then you leaned into it, and that was 2017, 8 years later, you're a completely different human being when it comes to business, everything around that. I mean, wouldn't you agree with that?
100%. I went from being a solo entrepreneur to now part of multiple businesses where, you know, I'm very grateful to say much smarter people than me are handling what they're respectively smart at, and I'm only doing the things. So for the cannabis business, for instance, people are like, so what do you do for that? Obviously, I raise money. Obviously, I'm moving forward on the construction. Most of what I do though is I read the regulations, I interact with the regulators, with the lobbyists, with the with the compliance side of things. I talk to the other business owners to see what are they seeing, because it's a very, everything is kept close to the vest. So if you're not reaching out and talking to the other owners, there's very little that you'll find out just by way of announcements or anything of that sort. So,
Yeah.
the majority of what I'm doing is making the executive decisions, talking to the other owners, talking to the regulators, making sure that we're staying compliant and moving forward on this construction project. We just opened our first dispensary a couple months ago. I'm working on picking up another one, moving the business forward while letting my people do what they're good at, man.
Yep. I love it. I love it. It's what Kelly Garrett said in Napa. You're casting a vision, trying to create a culture. And you said something earlier, and I'll end on this because it made me think. Most entrepreneurs always give the feedback they wish they would have started sooner. Um, I'm not that way. I think, like you just mentioned, you spend a lot of time reading legislation and reading the fine print. Well, you wouldn't have that ability or desire if you hadn't have spent so many years studying and practicing law, right?
Absolutely.
So if you had started this then without that skill set being built, you probably wouldn't be as valuable in this space as you have turned into over the years. I'm the same way. I spent 17 years in the insurance industry, most of those years in leadership. I wouldn't be as good or as competent of a leader and a salesperson as I am now without all those years. So I think I started exactly when I was supposed to start, and that's how I feel about it,
So that was the second part of the conversation was, are you happy with who you are today as an individual? Because you are the sum of all those experiences.
Yep.
So if you are happy, and I can truly say I'm extremely happy with my life, with who I am as an individual, with what I've learned. Of course, I would love to know more. Of course, I'd love to be ahead of where I am in life, but I'm extremely happy with where I am. And I am where I am today because of all of the experiences that I've been through.
Boom. Perfect place to wrap this thing up, Fadi. I appreciate you coming on, man. I can't come to Asheville, unfortunately. I won't see you there, but wherever the next one is, I know our paths will cross, if not sooner. So
How dare you skip one, sir?
I know it. I know it. I wish I could say I was skipping for something business related, very big, but I have a golf trip that is.
Hey, sometimes those are just as important, man.
I'll be in Scottsdale while y'all are in the mountains, so that's where I'll be. But Fadi, again, I appreciate you coming on, man. Appreciate the time, and
I appreciate you having me on, man. It was an absolute pleasure.
Yep, and like I said, I'm gonna drop all your information in the show notes, so anybody interested in anything you have going on, whether it's legacy family or anything he's got going on in real estate, but particularly this cannabis business is very exciting. So I encourage y'all all to reach out and see what it's all about. So with that, we'll wrap up another episode of Burning the Ships. Thank you for tuning in to this episode of Burning the Ships. I want to give a special thanks to our sponsor, 608B Capital, helping real estate investors secure fast, reliable funding to fuel their boldest moves. If you're ready to take your investing to the next level, visit 608bcapital.com to learn more. If you found value in today's episode, please take a moment to rate and review the podcast. Your feedback not only helps us improve, but it also helps us reach more people who are ready to burn the ships and commit fully to their goals. And don't forget to share the episode with someone who needs that extra push to take bold action. I'll leave you with this. Burning the ships isn't just about removing the option to retreat. It's about unlocking the courage to charge forward. No matter the odds, the past is behind you and the future is yours to conquer. Thank you for listening, and I'll see you next time on Burning the Ships.